I was 31 years old the summer I decided to camp alone for the first time. It wasn't a midlife crisis or anything like that. I just needed to be away from people. The stress of work had been chewing at me for months. I was working construction in Oklahoma, doing 12-hour shifts in the heat, coming home sore and angry every day. I didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to think. I just wanted quiet. I figured a few days out in the woods would help clear my head. I picked a place up in the Oklahoma Panhandle, right near the border with Texas, a chunk of public land called the Beaver Breaks. Not a popular place, mostly grasslands with deep cuts and draws that carve into the ground like old scars. A buddy of mine had hunted mule deer out there once and said it was remote and beautiful, so I figured it'd be perfect. I didn't want anything fancy, no campgrounds, no RV hookups, no outhouses. Just space, solitude, and silence. I packed up my truck with everything I thought I'd need: tent, food, water jugs, folding chair, basic gear, and drove west early on a Thursday morning in late August. The drive took around 5 hours. By the time I got to the little gravel road that led into the public land, I'd already seen less than a dozen vehicles. Once I turned off the main highway and onto that road, I didn't see another soul. I drove for about 30 minutes down the gravel, bouncing a bit over washouts and cattle guards. There weren't any signs, but I downloaded some maps beforehand and had marked a few spots where I thought I could pull off and set up camp. I passed a dry creek bed and then cut south down a narrow dirt path, more like 2 ruts in the grass. It led me into a low basin where the wind had carved out layers of rock and soil. It was quiet, just the sound of the breeze and the occasional chirp from crickets or grasshoppers. No people, no noise. Exactly what I wanted. I parked my truck on a flat spot near a rocky outcrop and spent an hour setting up camp. Tent staked, food stored in the cab of the truck, small fire pit made with rocks. I gathered some dried grass and twigs for kindling and stacked it nearby. I planned to stay for 4 days, Thursday through Sunday, and head back Monday morning. I had plenty of food: canned stuff, jerky, trail mix, even a cooler with ice packs for the first couple of days. I also brought a few gallons of water, since I didn't trust the dry creek beds to have anything drinkable. That first day was peaceful. I walked the area, took photos, climbed some of the rock ridges and looked out over the draws. There were endless stretches of scrub and grass, broken only by the occasional twisted cedar or big chunk of sandstone. I spotted a couple of jackrabbits and saw signs of deer, tracks and droppings mostly, but otherwise it felt like the land had been forgotten by everything human. I liked that. That night, I made a small fire and sat in my folding chair, watching the stars. No moon, just that wide, endless sky full of stars so bright it almost felt fake. I didn't realize how quiet things were until I tried to fall asleep. No traffic, no electricity, no planes, nothing. Just the occasional gust of wind and the distant yipping of coyotes. I slept fine, though. No dreams, just blackness. The second day, I wandered farther. I carried my day pack with snacks, water, and a basic first aid kit. I kept my GPS on me too. I had no cell service out there, but the GPS worked well enough offline. I went down into one of the deeper breaks and followed it for a couple of miles. The sides of the draw were steep in some places, almost like cliffs, with layers of rock that had eroded into weird shapes. I saw a lot of animal tracks, mostly deer, some coyotes, a few that might have been bobcat, but nothing fresh. No human tracks anywhere. About mid-afternoon, I stopped at a shady spot under a small overhang and had a snack. I listened. Still no signs of people. Felt like I was the only human for miles. I even thought about how weird it was that I hadn't seen any planes overhead. Not one, but I shrugged it off. Probably just the remoteness of the area. It was late afternoon when I started heading back. The sky was starting to shift in color, and I wanted to be back before dark. I took a slightly different route, climbing out of the draw earlier and walking the ridges above my camp. That's when I saw something odd. About 100 yards away, in a patch of taller grass, there was a pile of something. I squinted. At first I thought it might be rocks or wood, but when I got closer, I realized it was a dead animal. A deer. A small one, maybe a yearling, but something had torn it up bad. It was fresh. The blood was still wet, the meat red and shiny. Flies hadn't even found it yet. Its guts were spread out like someone had opened it up for display. The rib cage had been cracked wide open. I looked around but didn't see anything. No people, no animals, no drag marks either. It hadn't been killed somewhere else and brought here. It had died right there. I felt a little off, standing near it. The air felt heavier. I didn't smell anything, though not rot, just blood. I backed away and made my way back to camp faster than before. My brain was trying to reason it out. Maybe a cougar? I hadn't seen any signs of one, but that didn't mean they weren't around. Coyotes could tear up a deer too, though not usually like that. Back at camp, I didn't light a fire. I sat in my truck instead, windows cracked. Just listened. Couldn't hear much. That night was harder to sleep. I kept waking up, listening. I thought I heard something walking near the tent a few times, but when I unzipped the flap and looked out, nothing was there. On the third day, I stayed close to camp. I thought about leaving, honestly. Something about the deer kill had gotten under my skin. But I told myself I was overreacting. Animals kill each other out here all the time. I'd just never seen it that fresh before. Late that morning, I hiked to a nearby hill and brought my binoculars. I scanned the area. Nothing. Just grass, rocks, brush. No movement. I sat there for over an hour, just glassing the breaks. Then I saw something strange. Near the ridge where I'd found the deer, I saw a patch of grass that looked matted down, like someone had been lying there. I couldn't be sure it was too far, but it didn't look natural. And then I saw a faint path, like a game trail, but it cut through the grass in a straight line. Too straight, and it led uphill toward a small cluster of rocks. I decided not to investigate. That evening, right before the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard something, a crunch, then another. Footsteps, not animal footsteps, heavier, more deliberate. I froze in my tent. The sound moved around my truck, slow and careful, like someone checking it out. I didn't have a gun, just a hatchet and a knife. I waited, barely breathing. After what felt like an hour, the sound stopped. I stayed awake all night, just listening. In the morning, I found footprints, boot prints, not mine. They were narrower and smaller than mine, like a man's size 9 or so. I wear a 12. The prints circled my truck and then led off into the grass. They didn't come from the road. They came from the direction of the ridge, from the area near that deer kill. I packed up. I didn't even eat breakfast. I shoved everything into the bed of the truck, tore down the tent without folding it, and got out. As I drove away, I kept looking in the rearview mirror. I didn't see anyone, but that didn't calm me. I didn't stop until I hit the highway. I drove all the way to a gas station in a town called Boise City. While filling up, I checked the back of the truck, looked for anything weird. Nothing. But when I got home that evening and unpacked my gear, I found something I hadn't put there. A rock, smooth and black like obsidian or something close to it. It was sitting in the pocket of my folding chair. I know I didn't bring it. I would have noticed. It was heavy too, like a paperweight. I threw it out. I haven't been back to the break since. I've gone camping again, just not alone. And not anywhere near there. I don't know who was out there or what they wanted, but it wasn't random. Someone was watching me. The deer, the footprints, the sounds outside the tent. It all felt like part of something, like someone wanted me to know they were there. I'm glad I left when I did. If I'd stayed another night, I don't think I'd be writing this. I've always been the kind of person who enjoys being alone in the woods. Not because I hate people or anything like that. More because I feel like it resets something inside me. The quiet, the rhythm of the trees, the way the wind moves through a forest. It all gives me this strange sense of calm I never get in town. In late September of 2019, I took a week off work from a logistics company I'd been with for nearly 8 years. I wasn't married, didn't have any kids, so there was no one to run it by. I just packed up my old blue Tacoma with my tent, food, camping gear, and headed north from Billings into a quieter stretch of Montana I hadn't visited before. I picked a spot near Alder Creek, just south of the Kootenay National Forest line. Not far from Libby, but far enough that I knew I wouldn't see many people, especially that time of year. It was shoulder season, past the tourist rush, but before the snow started falling heavy. The weather was already shifting. Cool nights, crisp mornings, and long stretches of silence broken only by the sounds of birds and the occasional rustling in the trees. I had no intention of staying in any official campground. I liked to find my own slice of land, set up where no one would stumble across me. I used a USGS map to find an old logging road that looked abandoned. It ran east from a dirt service road, then faded into the ridge line about a mile past Alder Creek. I followed it as far as I could in the truck, parked just before the trail became impassable, and hiked in maybe 2 more miles. I set up my tent near a slight incline above the creek. The slope gave me a decent view, and I could hear the water clearly, which always helped me sleep. I hung my food in a tree well away from my tent, as I always did. I brought my .357 revolver and my bear spray, kept both close, and followed all the usual precautions. I'd been doing this kind of thing for years without trouble. The first 2 days were exactly what I needed. I spent them hiking the ridgelines, reading under the sun, boiling water for coffee, and sitting for long periods just watching the wind move through the trees. No phone service, no emails, no traffic, just the wilderness and me. The nights were cold, sure, but I was prepared. I had a good sleeping bag, wool socks, a hat. I stayed warm, but on the 3rd night, something changed. I'd gone on a longer hike that day, pushing farther up the ridge than I'd originally planned. The terrain was rougher, and I found myself scrambling over loose rock at one point. I nearly slipped, but managed to catch myself. Still, I twisted my ankle a little. It wasn't bad enough to make me limp, but I felt it by the time I got back to camp just before dusk. I boiled some ramen, added some jerky for protein, and ate while watching the sun drop behind the trees. The sky turned orange, then deep red, and then finally faded into that deep forest blue. I zipped myself into the tent, read for a bit under my headlamp, and eventually turned it off around 9:30. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not from a noise, at least not that I remembered, but because I felt off. You know that feeling you get when you wake up and something's just not right? That's what it was. It was dead quiet. No wind, no creek sounds, nothing. That struck me as odd. The creek had been gurgling pretty loud when I went to bed. For it to be completely silent now meant either I was losing my hearing or something was wrong. I unzipped my sleeping bag slowly, careful not to make much noise. I listened for any sound. Branches snapping, rustling leaves, movement, but I heard nothing. Just silence. My ears felt like they were straining for something. I waited for a few minutes before unzipping the tent. My revolver was in my right hand, flashlight in the left. I kept the light off at first. My eyes had adjusted to the dark, and I didn't want to kill that. I peeked outside. The sky was clear, plenty of stars, no clouds. The moon was nearly full, lighting up the ridge like a dim lantern. I couldn't see anything out of place at first. The trees swayed slightly, but there was still no wind. The air was perfectly still. That's when I noticed the rope I used to hang my food swinging lightly. That alone wouldn't have bothered me if there had been any breeze. But there wasn't. Not even the kind of air that moves leaves. That bag should have been still. It wasn't swinging wildly or anything, just a slow side-to-side motion, like someone had just tapped it. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds. It slowed down, eventually stopped. I clicked the flashlight on and scanned the area around the tree. Nothing. I walked over, slowly, keeping my head on a swivel. My bear spray was on my hip. Every few steps, I stopped to listen. When I got to the tree, I scanned the ground. No fresh tracks, no claw marks. The dirt was dry and covered in needles. I backed up and looked around again. Still nothing. I figured maybe it had been swinging for me walking around the tent earlier. Maybe I'd bumped something on the way to bed and didn't remember. I tried to shrug it off, but I didn't sleep well the rest of the night. I kept hearing soft crunching sounds, like someone or something was stepping carefully through the woods. Not loudly, not breaking branches, just barely there. The next morning, I made a point of checking the perimeter of my campsite. I walked in a widening circle from my tent out about 50 feet, checking for prints or disturbances in the brush. I didn't see anything out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me. It's not the kind of thing you can prove, but it sticks in your gut all the same. I spent most of the day reading and resting my ankle, which had stiffened up a little overnight. I considered packing out early, but I talked myself out of it. I dealt with fear in the woods before. Sometimes it's just your brain turning the silence into a threat. I stayed. That night, I double-checked everything. Hung my food higher, made sure the rope was tied well. I stacked a few rocks near the trail leading to my tent, just little cairns, so I'd know if someone or something walked through. I even put a small bell on one, the kind I usually attach to my backpack when hiking in bear country. Then I got into the tent, zipped it up, and waited. It was maybe 2 hours later that I heard the rocks fall. The clatter wasn't loud, just a soft cascade of stone, like a foot had knocked them over. The bell jingled once, then stopped. I sat bolt upright in my sleeping bag. My heart started pounding. I held my breath and listened again. More silence. Then I heard a slow, deliberate crunch. A single step. Not an animal's. Not fast enough. Not light enough. It was a human step. I grabbed my revolver and flashlight again. I turned on the light, aimed it toward the trail. Nothing. I stepped out of the tent and scanned everything. My cairns were knocked over. The bell was gone. Just gone. I froze. Every instinct in me was screaming to run, but I didn't know where to go. My truck was miles away. No one knew exactly where I was. I was off trail. No cell service. I backed toward the tent, then changed my mind. I grabbed my sleeping bag, shoved it in my pack with the essentials, and decided I'd hike back toward the truck under moonlight. I knew the route. It wasn't ideal with my ankle, but I didn't feel safe staying another minute. As I packed, I kept hearing faint footsteps, sometimes to my left, sometimes behind me. Every time I shined my light, there was nothing. I finally slung the pack over my shoulder, holstered the revolver, and started walking. My flashlight cut through the woods in front of me, but the shadows always felt like they were moving just beyond its edge. About 15 minutes into the hike, I found the bell. It was hanging from a low branch beside the trail. I hadn't put it there. I didn't stop. I didn't even touch it. I just kept going. Another mile in, I started hearing whistles. Short bursts, a high-pitched tone, then a low one, like a signal. I stopped and listened, heart pounding in my chest. The whistles came again, closer this time. I turned off the flashlight, let my eyes adjust. In the distance, I saw a flicker of movement, someone ducking behind a tree. I didn't wait to see more. I started moving faster, pushing through the undergrowth, ignoring the pain in my ankle. I didn't stop again until I saw the faint reflection of my truck in the moonlight, peeking through the trees where I'd left it near the end of the road. I climbed in, locked the doors, and just sat there for a few minutes trying to catch my breath. I didn't see or hear anything else that night. No footsteps, no whistles, nothing. I drove straight through the night back to Billings. I didn't stop, didn't sleep, just kept going until I was back in my apartment. I never reported it. What would I even say? That someone was whistling in the woods? That someone moved my bell? Left no tracks? Watched me? I've told a few close friends, but most just shrug it off. Tell me it was probably a hunter or another camper messing with me. But I know what I felt. That wasn't some lost hiker. That wasn't a coincidence. That was someone who knew exactly where I was, who stayed silent when I moved, who approached my tent in the middle. I was 36 the summer I decided to go camping alone in the Ouachita National Forest down in Arkansas. It wasn't the kind of trip I normally took. I had always camped with friends, or at the very least with my younger brother, but that year I needed something different. Life had been heavy. I was burned out from work, freshly divorced, and tired of being around people all the time. I figured a long weekend off the grid might help me clear my head. I picked a place deep in the forest near a ridge called Deadwood. It wasn't a formal campsite, more of a quiet, remote spot I found on a topo map with a narrow Forest Service road leading near it. I planned to hike in with my gear and stay for 3 nights. I told my sister where I'd be, marked the general area on a map, and left the rest to fate. I drove my old Subaru down from Tulsa and reached the forest in the early afternoon. The road leading to Deadwood Ridge was little more than a pair of tire tracks lined with high weeds and old branches. I took it slow, driving over dips and bumps until I reached a flat patch big enough to park the car off the trail. There were no other vehicles in sight, no tire marks in the dirt, and no cell service. That was the idea. I was alone out there, exactly how I wanted. I grabbed my pack and started hiking west, following the ridge. It was quiet, just the kind of quiet you get way out in the backcountry where there's no electricity, no traffic, nothing. The forest was a mix of pine and hardwood. I followed game trails at first, then bushwhacked when the trees got too thick. After about an hour of hiking, I found a great spot on a ledge above a narrow creek. There was enough flat ground for my tent, a decent view of the woods below, and enough trees around to hang food and stay hidden. I set up camp, built a small fire pit with rocks, and filtered water from the creek. Everything was going smoothly. The sun dropped behind the trees, and the woods got darker fast. That first night was calm. Crickets, the occasional owl, and the wind in the trees. I slept well. The second day started out normal too. I boiled some water, made coffee, and hiked farther along the ridge to explore. I marked trees with bright tape to make sure I could find my way back. I saw deer tracks, some coyote scat, nothing out of the ordinary. The woods were thick and shaded, and I didn't run into a single person. By late afternoon, I headed back to camp. I was tired, but in a good way. My legs sore from climbing, my mind finally feeling quiet. When I got back, though, something felt off. I couldn't explain it right away. The tent was still there, untouched. My gear was fine, but the little things were different. My water bottle wasn't where I left it. My camp chair was folded and leaning against a tree when I swore I'd left it open. I convinced myself I'd just forgotten. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe I had moved stuff without realizing it. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. I kept looking up from the fire, expecting to see someone in the trees. I even turned off my headlamp for a few minutes to listen. Nothing, just forest sounds. Still, I kept the hatchet in the tent with me when I crawled into my sleeping bag. I didn't fall asleep easy, and when I finally did, it wasn't for long. I woke up sometime in the night to a noise. Twigs snapping. Close. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I waited, holding my breath, then slowly reached for the hatchet. The noise didn't come back. I didn't hear footsteps, no voices, no rustling. Just 1 or 2 quick snaps like someone had stepped on a stick and then stopped. I lay there for hours, eyes wide open, listening. Eventually, the sky started to lighten and I let myself doze for maybe 20 minutes before getting up. That morning, I checked around camp. No animal tracks, no disturbed branches, nothing missing. I convinced myself again it was nothing. Maybe a deer, maybe I dreamed it, but the feeling stuck. My nerves were on edge the entire day. I didn't leave camp. I sharpened sticks for no reason. I kept checking over my shoulder. The forest no longer felt peaceful. It felt too quiet, like everything was watching me. I kept hearing faint sounds, things moving through the trees, twigs cracking again, always at the edge of my hearing. Not often, just enough to keep me on alert. Around midday, I heard something that wasn't part of the woods. It was short and faint, but it sounded like metal, like the soft clank of gear. It came from farther up the ridge, somewhere behind thick brush. I stood there for a while, waiting to hear it again, but it didn't repeat. I didn't go check. I stayed by camp. I kept the fire going all day just to feel less alone. That evening, I packed most of my gear and stashed it near the base of a tree in case I needed to leave fast. I left only what I needed to cook dinner and sleep. The idea of staying another night in that tent made my stomach turn, but I knew I wouldn't be able to hike back in the dark. I forced myself to eat, then stayed up until the fire burned low. When I finally crawled into the tent, I didn't take off my boots. I didn't sleep at all that night, Sometime around 2 or 3 a.m., I heard something move again, but this time it was louder, closer. It wasn't a deer. I know what deer sound like. This was heavier, slower, not crashing through brush like a bear or running like a coyote, just walking. I sat up, holding the hatchet. I turned off my light and waited. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. There was a long stretch of silence. Then I heard breathing. Real human breathing, just outside the tent. I didn't move. The breathing stayed for what felt like a full minute, then slowly faded into the woods. I sat there for hours, frozen. At some point, I realized I was holding the hatchet so tight my fingers hurt. I stayed like that until the first light came through the nylon. I got out, packed everything, and left. I didn't eat, didn't even brush my teeth. I just slung the pack over my shoulders and started hiking back to the car. I didn't stop, not to rest, not to drink water. The whole way, I felt like something was behind me, not close, just always there, always following. When I finally saw my car through the trees, I felt like I could breathe again. I unlocked the doors, tossed my gear in the back, and turned the key. The engine struggled. For 1 second, I thought it wouldn't start, but it kicked over. I drove fast, reckless. Branches scraped the sides as I sped down the overgrown trail. I didn't care. When I hit the pavement again, I drove all the way back to Tulsa without stopping. Later, when I checked my gear, I realized something was missing. My camp knife. It was a fixed blade, 6 inches, black handle. I always kept it on the side of my pack. It wasn't there. I didn't drop it. I didn't use it on the last day. It was just gone. I thought about reporting it, but what would I even say? That I went camping and felt watched? That I heard breathing? That someone might have been stalking me but didn't actually do anything? There was no crime, nothing provable, just fear. I didn't go into the woods alone again after that. Months later, I was reading about the area and found a short article buried deep in a local forum. Someone had gone missing up near Deadwood Ridge a few years earlier. A solo hiker. No remains found. The car was left behind. It was ruled inconclusive. The area wasn't considered dangerous. No predators, no history of crime. Just remote, quiet woods. Too quiet. That trip taught me something I didn't expect. Not about nature, not about peace or healing, but about danger. Real danger. The kind you don't see. The kind that waits. That watches. That doesn't rush. The kind that doesn't need to do anything loud or violent to change you forever. I never got closure. Never saw who it was. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. And I know I'll never go back. It was early October when I decided to go camping on my own. The weather was still holding up, and the air had that crisp edge to it, the kind of coolness that told you fall was in full swing, but winter hadn't yet taken over. I had been itching for some alone time. I wasn't a stranger to the outdoors, having camped since I was a kid, but this time, I needed a break from the world and the endless noise of daily life. I picked out a remote spot on a trail I found online, Camp Willow Creek, deep in the Cascades. It wasn't the most popular campsite, which was exactly why I liked it. I wanted to get away from the crowds, away from the constant hum of other people. I wanted silence, the kind of silence that only the deep woods can offer. I packed my gear the night before. A tent, sleeping bag, some food, my camp stove, a flashlight, and a book I planned to read by the campfire. Nothing too fancy. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary, just a simple solo camping trip. Nothing had gone wrong on my past trips, and I wasn't about to let myself worry this time. I had my maps, my compass, and a well-thought-out plan to stick to the trail and avoid getting lost. The drive out to the campsite was long. The trees grew denser as I drove deeper into the wilderness, and the roads got narrower. I didn't mind. The further I got away from the city, the more at peace I felt. I parked my truck at the trailhead and made my way to the campsite, 1.5 miles away. I had a small backpack with essentials: water, snacks, a map of the area, and my phone, mostly for emergency purposes. By the time I reached the site, the sun was beginning to set. I took a moment to appreciate the beauty around me. The colors of fall were all over the trees, reds, yellows, and oranges. The creek was bubbling nearby. The sound of water running over rocks was comforting. I set up my tent by the creek, a perfect little spot where the sound of the water would lull me to sleep. I gathered some dry wood for a fire and got the flames going. I wasn't in any rush, just taking it slow. The chill in the air felt refreshing, a nice break from the stuffy city. I didn't hear any birds, but that didn't bother me. The quiet seemed like a good thing. As the fire crackled, I dug into the food I brought with me. I ate in silence, savoring the moment of peace. But as the night deepened, something started to change. It wasn't anything drastic, just a feeling I couldn't shake. I tried to ignore it, figuring it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But the longer I sat by the fire, the more I felt it. This unsettling sense that something was off. I looked around the clearing, the dark forest surrounding me like an impenetrable wall. There were no other campers nearby, no sounds except for the creak and the crackle of my fire. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, though I couldn't place why. I thought I saw movement in the trees out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing. It was almost as if the forest was watching me. I didn't know what to make of it. I brushed it off, deciding it was just my imagination. It had been a long day of travel, and the fire's warmth and the quiet had made me feel a little too comfortable. I poured myself some tea from my camp stove and settled into my camp chair, trying to read my book. But I couldn't focus. The feeling kept creeping in, that sense of being watched. I finally decided it was time to turn in for the night. I banked the fire, making sure it wouldn't go out entirely, and crawled into my tent. I zipped it shut and tried to settle into my sleeping bag, telling myself I was just being paranoid. It was probably just the isolation messing with my mind. I must have dozed off after a while, but I woke up in the middle of the night, a feeling of unease jolting me awake. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I couldn't explain why. The night outside the tent was still, too still. There was no wind, no rustling of leaves, no animals stirring, just an oppressive, thick silence. I reached over to my flashlight and clicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. I listened carefully, trying to pick up on any sound. The creek was quiet, felt wrong. Then I heard something, a soft crunching noise, like something heavy was stepping on dry leaves. It came from somewhere near the edge of the clearing, just outside the light's reach. My heart skipped a beat. I froze. The noise stopped. For a long time, nothing happened. I lay there, listening to the silence, trying to rationalize what I'd heard. Could have been an animal, a deer or something. But then I heard it again, this time closer, right outside the tent. The unmistakable sound of something moving through the brush. I couldn't stay still any longer. I unzipped the tent cautiously, peering out into the dark. There was nothing there. The night felt oppressive now. The trees seemed to loom over me like they were closing in. I shone my flashlight toward the trees, scanning the area. Nothing. But something wasn't right. My instincts were screaming at me. I quickly grabbed my knife and slipped it into my pocket. I had no real reason to think I was in danger, but something about the silence, the way the air felt, told me to be ready. I decided to go check it out. With the flashlight in one hand and my knife in the other, I stepped outside the tent. The ground was cold beneath my boots, and I kept my senses sharp, every little sound amplified in the quiet. I moved toward the area where I'd heard the noises. The flashlight beam cut through the dark, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally. I kept telling myself it was just a deer or some other animal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I reached the edge of the clearing, I heard it again. The crunching sound, closer this time. But this time it wasn't just one noise. It was several in different spots, as if something was moving in the trees around me. My heart raced. I spun around, shining my light everywhere, but there was nothing there. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me. I whipped around, my flashlight beam swinging wildly, but I saw nothing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My breath caught in my throat. It was then that I noticed it, something out of place. A small pile of rocks, stacked neatly in the middle of the clearing. I hadn't noticed them before, but now they were there, and I couldn't figure out how they had gotten there. The moment I focused on the rocks, I heard another noise, this one much louder, like something moving fast through the underbrush. I bolted back toward the tent, my mind racing. I had to get inside. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was hunting me. The tent, once a safe space, now felt like a flimsy barrier. I threw myself inside, zipped it up, and sat there, staring at the walls of the tent, my breath coming in quick gasps. I kept hearing noises around me, the sound of leaves rustling, twigs snapping, but when I shone the flashlight outside, there was nothing. It was hours before I could bring myself to sleep again. When I finally did, I had nightmares. Flashes of eyes watching me from the darkness, things moving just out of my reach. The crunching noises were still in my head. The next morning, I was exhausted. The sun was up, and the silence of the night had given way to the natural sounds of the forest, birds, rustling leaves, and the distant rush of water. But something had shifted overnight. I packed my things quickly, my nerves on edge, and before long, I was hiking back to the trailhead, my footsteps quick and uneasy. I don't know exactly what happened that night, but I'll never forget the feeling of being watched, of hearing those noises just beyond my tent. I never went back to that campsite again. I don't know who or what was out there in the dark, but I do know that it wasn't just my imagination. Something was waiting for me, and I don't plan on finding out what. It was July 2012 when I decided to go camping alone in northern Montana, somewhere off a side road not far from Kootenai National Forest. I was 32 at the time, working a job in Spokane, Washington, and had just gone through a breakup with my girlfriend of 3 years. I wanted space from people, from my job, from everything. I had a long weekend, a decent four-wheel drive SUV, and an old Army-style canvas tent that had seen more backcountry than I had. I picked a place I'd never been before. I found it using a combination of hiking forums, a topographic map, and just poking around Google Earth. It was a spot west of Libby, way out there. A little area some locals on a forum called Dead Elk Ridge. I never asked where the name came from. It sounded rugged and remote, and that's exactly what I wanted. I packed up my gear, tent, sleeping bag, water, food for 3 days, a hunting knife I never really used, bear spray, a flashlight, a GPS, and a pistol I had inherited from my dad. I wasn't planning on hunting or anything, but I liked having the pistol when I was alone. Made me feel like I had some control if something unexpected happened. I had no cell signal after I left Libby and didn't expect to get it back till I was headed home. I started the drive in early morning light, left the highway after about 30 miles, and followed a narrow logging road for almost 2 hours. The deeper I went, the worse the road got. Potholes, rocks, washed out sections, but my SUV handled it fine. I passed a few old logging pullouts, some clearings with fire pits that hadn't been used in a while, and finally reached the spot I had picked out on the map. It wasn't a campground, just a flat patch near the edge of a ridge overlooking a long stretch of pine forest. There were no trail markers, no signs, no trash, nothing, just dirt, trees, and the sound of wind moving through the branches. It was perfect. I set up camp fast. Tent went up easy. I staked it down with big rocks at the corners because the soil was soft. The fire pit took longer since I had to dig it out and line it with stones. I kept everything tidy, bear-safe containers, no food near the tent, nothing to attract anything curious in the night. The first day was fine. I hiked down from the ridge into the woods and back up again before sunset. Ate a freeze-dried meal, sat by the fire, and listened to the wind and distant bird calls. Around midnight, I climbed into my sleeping bag and fell asleep fast. The quiet out there was deeper than anything I ever felt in the city. It wasn't silence, more like nature holding its breath. The second day started normal. I boiled water for coffee, ate a granola bar, and decided to explore further along the ridge, following an old game trail that ran parallel to the edge. The trail was overgrown but still visible. I took my GPS and marked my camp as a waypoint, just in case I lost the trail or got turned around. After maybe an hour and a half of slow walking and taking breaks, I found what looked like an old hunting camp. Not like a modern one, this looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Rusted out metal poles stuck up from the ground, maybe once part of a stand or a canopy. There were torn strips of canvas half buried under pine needles and a crushed aluminum pot with bullet holes in it. It looked like someone had either shot it for fun or used it for target practice years ago. Something about the place felt strange. Not bad, just forgotten. I didn't stay long. Took a couple pictures with my old digital camera and moved on. As I turned back, clouds started rolling in, thick and dark. I checked the weather before I left, and there hadn't been any rain in the forecast, but out here you couldn't always count on predictions. By the time I got back to camp, the wind had picked up and the sky looked like a bad painting. Dark blues and heavy gray clouds pressing low over the ridge. I gathered firewood fast, enough to last through the night, and reinforced the rainfly on my tent just in case. Rain came down hard around 7. No thunder, just sheets of cold water and strong wind. I stayed in the tent, read a paperback novel by headlamp, and tried to ignore the way the fabric shook with every gust. The sound of the rain was loud, but not enough to drown out what I started to hear around 10 o'clock. Branches snapping nearby. At first, I thought it was the wind. It had to be, but some of the cracks were sharp and deliberate, like footsteps, not quick but slow 1-2 pause, then nothing for a minute, then again. I stayed still in my sleeping bag, heart beating fast. I grabbed the pistol and sat up slowly, didn't unzip the tent, didn't make a sound. It went on for a while. Movement around the edge of my camp. Branches crunching, twigs snapping. I kept telling myself it was probably a bear, or a moose, or something harmless but curious. But I never heard the deep huffing or snorting you usually got with animals that size. Eventually, around midnight, it stopped. The rain got lighter, and I must have dozed off sitting upright because I woke with a stiff neck just after sunrise. I stepped outside and checked around. Found nothing. No prints, no signs of anything messing with my stuff. The ground was too rocky near the tent to leave footprints, and the rain had erased anything else. Still, something felt wrong. I thought about packing up and heading home, but I didn't want to seem like I was spooked. I told myself I was being paranoid. I made breakfast, drank more coffee, and decided to hike a different direction. North, away from the ridge, deeper into the woods. That was a mistake. I left around 11, following a dry creek bed. It twisted and dropped downhill fast, and I got carried away with how far I went. The woods out there were thick, massive pine trees with almost no underbrush. The farther I walked, the more I felt boxed in. Around 1 p.m., I realized I didn't recognize anything around me. I pulled out the GPS. No signal. The screen flickered, then froze. I tapped it, held the power button. Nothing. Dead. I wasn't panicked yet. I knew the ridge was south, so I turned around and tried to retrace my steps. But after 30 minutes, I still didn't see the dry creek bed. I started to get nervous. The sun was higher now, and with the cloud cover still hanging around, it was hard to tell direction. I pulled out the compass I kept in the emergency pouch of my pack. It was cheap but functional. South was that way. I pushed forward, heart beating harder with each step. Every tree looked the same. No trail, no signs, no broken branches. I kept walking. Around 3 p.m., I heard it again, branches breaking behind me. This time it was closer, not an animal. I froze. Then I heard it again. Footsteps, not heavy, just steady. Then silence. I turned fast, nothing there. The forest was still. I picked up my pace. After 20 minutes, I saw a marker, an old orange ribbon tied to a tree, faded and dirty, probably from a logging crew or a hunting party. I followed it, hoping it meant someone else had been out here recently. Then I saw another ribbon, then a third. I followed them until I saw the clearing. Not my camp, not even close. It was another camp, abandoned, a collapsed tent, maybe green once but now torn and gray, a rusty cooler, a pair of boots, big ones, still standing next to the fire pit, soaked through. Everything was covered in moss and grime. This place had been here for years. Something wasn't right. I backed away, heart pounding. I didn't touch anything. I didn't look closer. I turned and walked fast, back toward the last ribbon, then south. I didn't stop until I saw the ridge through the trees. I got back to my camp just before dusk. The fire pit was wet but untouched. My gear was there. Tent looked fine, but something had moved my camp chair. It was just a little to the left of where I left it, angled toward the tent. I knew it wasn't the wind. The chair was weighted with a pack when I left. I didn't sleep that night. Sat up with the pistol, fire burning low. Wind howled again, but no rain, and no footsteps. I left at sunrise, packed everything up in 15 minutes. Didn't eat, didn't look back. I drove as fast as the road allowed, bouncing over ruts and rocks, until I hit pavement again. Got back to Libby by noon and booked a cheap motel just so I could shower and calm down. Later, back home, I tried to find anything about that abandoned camp. Asked around on a few forums, posted the pictures I took of the hunting site and mentioned the ribbons. A guy messaged me privately and asked if I had coordinates. I sent what I had from the GPS even though it had died out there. He told me the place I went was known by older locals, not as Dead Elk Ridge, but as something called the Drop Zone. Supposedly some hunters went missing back in the 80s, and the Forest Service never cleared out their camp. He didn't know more than that. Could have been local legend. Could have been real. All I know is I'll never go back. I still camp, still hike, but I don't go solo anymore, and I stay far away from places with no name on the map. Whatever was out there with me that night wasn't a ghost. What